The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Mrs. Agnes Peterson clutched her chipped ceramic mug, watching the steam rise from her instant coffee in the empty teacher's lounge. Her reflection in the break room window showed a woman in her 40s, graying temples barely concealed beneath a faded headband, wearing a cardigan with carefully mended holes at the elbows. Outside, Chicago's November wind rattled the glass panes of Lincoln Elementary School, carrying with it the promise of another brutal winter. Through the window she spotted him again, the small figure hunched against the brick wall behind the dumpster, his movements barely visible in the pre-dawn darkness. Agnes had noticed him 3 days ago. Each morning he appeared like a ghost, sorting through discarded papers, scratching marks with a broken pencil on crumpled flyers. Yesterday, she'd seen him fashioning something from newspaper, origami, perhaps. His bare feet were purple with cold, his thin frame swimming in a jacket several sizes too large. The janitor had chased him away twice, but he kept returning, drawn to the school like a moth to flame. She glanced at the clock, 6:15 a.m. Her first class wouldn't start for over an hour, but Agnes always arrived early. The extra time helped. Her prepare lessons on the woefully outdated computers, photocopy worksheets on the temperamental machine, and mentally steel herself for another day of overcrowded classrooms and underfunded dreams. At 43, she'd spent 18 years teaching at Lincoln Elementary, watching neighborhood kids cycle through her classroom while the school gradually crumbled around them. Her reflection stared back accusingly. When had her idealism transformed into mere survival? When had she stopped believing she could make a real difference and started counting days until retirement? The boy outside shifted, and something inside her stirred, a familiar ache she'd tried to silence for years. Agnes grabbed her coat and headed for the door. The morning air bit her cheeks as she approached the dumpster area. The boy looked up with startled eyes, clutching a paper creation to his chest. Up close, she could see he was perhaps 9 or 10, with dark hair matted against his forehead and intelligent eyes that held too much knowledge for someone so young. "Hello," she said softly, crouching to his level. "I'm Mrs. Peterson. I teach here." He clutched his paper bird tighter, studying her face as if memorizing every line. Without speaking, he held out the origami creation, a crude but recognizable bluebird made from a fast food wrapper. "Did you make this?" Agnes asked, accepting the small gift. The boy nodded, pointing at the bluebird pin on her worn blazer, a gift from her mother years ago. "Bluebird means hope," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the wind. "I made it for you." Agnes felt something crack open in her chest, a warmth spreading through the cold morning air. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Eli," he replied, then quickly looked away. "I should go. Do you have somewhere warm to go?" The question hung between them. Eli's silence was answer enough. Agnes found herself speaking before thinking, "Would you like to come inside? The cafeteria won't open for another hour, but I have some crackers in my classroom. And it's warm." Eli's eyes widened, but wariness clouded his features. "Won't you get in trouble?" "Let me worry about that," Agnes replied, extending her hand. After a moment's hesitation, Eli took it. His fingers were ice cold, and Agnes had to suppress a gasp at how thin he was. As they walked toward the school entrance, she noticed other early arrivals, the principal, a few teachers, some maintenance staff. Their eyes followed the unlikely pair with barely concealed curiosity and whispered disapproval. "There goes St. Agnes again," muttered Mr. Rodriguez, the gym teacher, loud enough for others to hear. "Always picking up strays." Agnes pretended not to notice the stares or hushed comments. In her classroom, she turned up the heat and found a clean towel for Eli to dry his feet. He huddled in the corner, clutching the bluebird, while she prepared a simple breakfast from her desk drawer. Reserves, crackers, a bruised apple, and a juice box left over from the previous day's snack time. As Eli ate hungrily, Agnes studied him. There was something different about this boy, though she couldn't pinpoint what. His eyes held an intensity she rarely saw in children, and the way he'd crafted that origami showed patience and skill beyond his apparent years. "Eli," she said gently, "do you have family? Someone who's looking for you?" He shook his head, swallowing the last of the apple. Grandma's in the hospital. Been there 2 weeks. Social worker lady keeps coming to the apartment, but I hide. Agnes felt her heart sink. Where have you been staying? Different places, he said evasively. Under the bridge sometimes, laundromat when it's really cold. That's not safe. Honey, there are places— No! Eli's voice cracked with sudden fear. They separate you. Kids go missing from those places. I won't disappear. The raw terror in his voice silenced Agnes. She knelt beside his chair, speaking softly. What if you stayed with me, just until we figure out something safer? Eli stared at her as if she'd spoken in a foreign language. You'd really do that? You don't even know me. I know enough, Agnes replied, surprising herself, with the certainty in her voice. I know you're hungry and cold and far too young to be alone. I know you made me this beautiful bird because you thought I needed hope. That tells me everything I need to know about your heart. For the first time, Eli smiled, a small, tentative expression that transformed his entire face. In that moment, Agnes made a decision that would change both their lives forever. The rest of the school day passed in a blur of whispered conversations and sideways glances. Agnes had arranged for Eli to stay in the nurse's office while she taught, but word spread quickly through the building. By lunchtime, the gossip had reached every corner of Lincoln Elementary. Poor thing doesn't have enough sense to stay out of trouble, one teacher commented loud enough for Agnes to hear, taking in some random kid off the street. The liability. Alone, began another. She can barely feed herself, a third added with false sympathy. Her car needs new brakes, her apartment's above that failed bakery. What's she thinking? Agnes carried her dented lunchbox to the empty music room, needing space to breathe. Eli found her there, peeking through the cracked door. They're talking about us, he said, slipping inside. Adults talk, Agnes replied, unwrapping her peanut butter sandwich. It doesn't always mean much. Eli sat beside her on the piano bench. My grandma used to say that people fear what they don't understand. Your grandmother sounds wise. She taught me lots of things before. Eli's voice trailed off. He pulled out several napkins from his pocket, smoothing them carefully. Want to see something? Agnes looked down as Eli began sketching with his broken pencil. At first, the marks seemed random, dots and lines scattered across the napkin. Then patterns emerged, numbers and symbols she didn't recognize. What is this, Eli? Just numbers, he shrugged. They tell stories if you know how to listen. Agnes studied the napkin, a strange feeling growing in her stomach. The patterns looked complex, mathematical in nature, but far beyond what she'd expect from a 9-year-old. Where did you learn this? Don't know, I just see them sometimes in my head, like right now. He pointed out the window to the parking lot. See those cars? If you wanted the most people to walk the shortest distance, you'd arrange them differently. Like this. He sketched rapidly, creating a diagram that looked suspiciously like optimization theory. Agnes felt the world tilt slightly. Eli, have you ever been tested? For special programs? He shook his head. Grandma homeschooled me, said schools weren't ready for the way my brain works. The final bell rang, ending the school day. Agnes made hurried arrangements with the principal, deflecting questions about Eli's temporary presence. Principal Martinez was skeptical, but agreed to let the boy stay until the next morning. But this can't become a regular thing, Agnes, he warned. We have policies, liability concerns. If something happens— I understand, Agnes assured him, though she wasn't sure she understood anything anymore. As they walked to her car, Agnes tried to process what she'd witnessed. The mathematical concepts Eli had displayed seemed beyond elementary understanding, yet he treated them like child's play. Was it possible she'd stumbled upon something extraordinary? Her one-bedroom apartment above Murphy's Bakery, closed for 3 years now, had seen better days. The wallpaper peeled in several places, and the heating system protested when asked to work too hard. Agnes had grown accustomed to living simply, stretching every dollar, wearing clothes until they fell apart. Eli stood in the middle of her cramped living room, taking in the modest surroundings without judgment. Agnes quickly reshuffled furniture, pulling out the couch cushions to create a makeshift bed. "This is temporary," she explained, spreading her one spare blanket over the makeshift bedding, "just until we find you a better situation." But even as she spoke the words, Agnes wondered if she meant them. Something about Eli felt right, as if the universe had guided that small, shivering boy to her particular corner of the world. That evening, as Agnes graded papers at her small kitchen table, Eli sat nearby with a stack of napkins she'd given him. The sound of his pencil scratching was oddly comforting, like a familiar rhythm she'd been waiting to hear. When she next looked up, her breath caught. Eli had covered napkin after napkin with intricate mathematical notations. The complexity was staggering. Equations that looked like they belonged in graduate-level textbooks rather than on convenience store napkins. What truly arrested her attention, however, was when his sketching had led to an unexpected discovery. Agnes realized she was looking at the boy they mocked. The child they thought was nothing more than an interesting teaching experiment had in fact been transforming her understanding of everything she thought she knew about potential and brilliance. The first week crawled by in a haze of whispered judgments and carefully averted eyes. Agnes heard every comment, each barely concealed criticism. "Did you see her at pickup yesterday? That boy has no shoes. I heard she's spending her own money feeding him. This isn't sustainable. Someone needs to intervene." Mrs. Patterson, from third grade, cornered Agnes during a faculty meeting. "Honey, I know your heart's in the right place, but you're not qualified for this. That child needs professional help. Social services, proper evaluation. You're just a teacher." Agnes wanted to argue, to defend her decision, but exhaustion weighed her down. She had been living on 4 hours of sleep, trying to manage her regular teaching load while caring for Eli. Her savings, already meager, dwindled quickly. She'd started buying generic cereal and walking to work to save gas money. The breaking point came on a Friday evening. Agnes arrived home to find a notice taped to her door, the building's management demanding next month's rent. She stared at the paper, doing quick math in her head. After buying Eli clothes and dealing with her car's brake repairs, she was short, dangerously short. Eli appeared in the doorway, still in the oversized shirt she'd bought him at the thrift store. "Everything okay?" Agnes forced a smile. "Just some papers to deal with. How was your day?" They'd established a routine. Eli spent mornings in various classrooms helping teachers with small tasks. Afternoons he'd work on his napkin papers while Agnes taught. The school had gradually accepted his presence, though with obvious reluctance. "Mrs. Chen showed me her computer program today," Eli said, settling onto the couch. "She's trying to help kids with math homework, but the interface is clunky." He pulled out several napkins covered in diagrams. Agnes had learned to recognize his work, the way he'd map out complex problems with stunning clarity. This latest creation appeared to be software architecture, though she couldn't be certain. "I think I could make it better," Eli continued. "More intuitive. Kids need to see math differently to understand it." Agnes studied the diagrams, that familiar flutter of wonder mixed with confusion. In quiet moments like these, she'd catch glimpses of something exceptional in Eli, a mind that seemed to operate on entirely different principles than most people's. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Agnes opened it to find Dr. Sarah Hendricks, a colleague who taught 6th grade. Sarah's expression was serious but kind. "Agnes, can we talk? I think there's something you need to know about Eli." They stepped into the hallway. Sarah glanced around as if checking for eavesdroppers. "I was talking to my brother-in-law yesterday," Sarah began. "He's a mathematics professor at Northwestern. I mentioned some of the work Eli's been doing, just in passing, you understand. Agnes, when I described those napkin drawings, his face went white. He asked me to bring some samples to him." Agnes felt her stomach tighten. "You showed him Eli's work?" "Just photographs on my phone. Nothing identifying, but Agnes..." Sarah grabbed her arm gently. "He says what this boy is doing isn't just advanced. It's revolutionary. Some of those patterns he creates, they're solving problems that graduate students struggle with." "That's impossible. He's 9 years old." "That's what I said." My brother-in-law asked if Eli had any formal training. When I said no, that he'd been homeless and living with you, Agnes, he wants to meet him. He wants to understand how an untrained child could see mathematics this way. Agnes stood frozen in the hallway, pieces clicking into place, the intensity in Eli's eyes when he worked. The complex patterns that seemed to flow from his mind without effort, the way he looked at everyday problems and saw solutions that others missed. What are you saying, Sarah? I'm saying that boy might be gifted beyond anything we've seen, and I'm saying there are people who can help, people who can give him opportunities you and I could never imagine. That night, as Eli slept on his makeshift bed, Agnes sat by the window staring at the city lights. She held one of his napkin drawings, studying the intricate patterns. Could it be true? Had she, in her simple act of kindness, discovered something extraordinary? Dr. Hendricks arrived on Saturday morning, bringing a tall man with graying temples and excited eyes. Dr. Michael Reeves introduced himself as chair of the mathematics department at Northwestern University. Agnes watched nervously as Eli, initially shy, began showing his work. Dr. Reeves examined napkin after napkin, his expression shifting from curiosity to amazement to something approaching awe. "Son," he said softly, "tell me about this pattern here. How did you arrive at this solution?" Eli shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "I don't know. I just see it, like when you look at clouds and see shapes." Dr. Reeves spent 3 hours with Eli, asking gentle questions, observing how the boy approached problems. Finally, he pulled Agnes aside. "Mrs. Peterson, I need you to understand what you're looking at. This child hasn't just stumbled onto mathematical concepts. He's intuiting principles that took humanity centuries to develop. Some of these patterns I'd need a team of graduate students to verify, but they appear to be novel approaches to optimization theory." Agnes felt the world shift again. "What does that mean?" "It means this boy could change how we understand mathematics, but more immediately, it means he needs resources we can provide. Training, guidance, proper tools to explore his abilities." "You want to take him away?" Agnes said, the words hollow in her throat. "No, that's not what I'm suggesting at all. Eli clearly has a strong attachment to you. What I'm proposing is a partnership. Northwestern has programs for exceptionally gifted children. We can provide tutoring, resources, academic opportunities, but we'd work with you as his guardian, if you're willing." Agnes looked at Eli, bent over another napkin, lost in his world of numbers and patterns. The boy who'd been thrown away by society might be a once-in-a-generation genius, and somehow, impossibly, he'd chosen to trust her with his future. Within days, everything changed. Dr. Reeves introduced Eli to his research team, who were astounded by the boy's intuitive grasp of complex theories. Word spread through academic circles. By the end of the week, Agnes found herself fielding calls from universities, mathematics journals, and even a documentary filmmaker. "We need to be careful," Dr. Reeves cautioned during one of their many conversations. "Eli's abilities are remarkable, but he's still a child. He needs stability, normalcy, time to grow." Agnes agreed completely. Even as extraordinary opportunities presented themselves, she insisted on maintaining routines. Eli still spent time at Lincoln Elementary, still slept on her couch, still helped her with mundane tasks like grocery shopping. But the napkins had been replaced with proper notebooks, and his broken pencil with mechanical ones that never dulled. Grad students visited regularly, eager to understand how a 9-year-old saw patterns they'd spent years studying. The transformation wasn't just in Eli. Agnes found herself drawn into a world she'd never imagined. She attended university seminars, learned about mathematical theory from professors who spoke of Eli with reverence. The woman who'd lived paycheck to paycheck was now consulted on everything regarding a boy whose mind might reshape entire fields of study. One evening, as they sat reviewing his latest work with Dr. Reeves, Eli looked up suddenly. "Miss Agnes," he said, "I've been thinking about efficiency problems in emergency response systems. What if we could predict resource allocation needs before disasters strike fully?" Dr. Reeves leaned forward, intrigued. Agnes simply smiled, no longer surprised by such moments. This was her normal now, living with a child whose thoughts operated on levels she couldn't always follow. 3 months after that first morning by the dumpster, Agnes answered a knock to find a well-dressed man with intelligent eyes and an eager expression. "Mrs. Peterson, I'm James Wheeler. I heard about young Eli through Dr. Reeves. I run a technology incubator. We develop innovations for social good." Agnes invited him in, curious. Eli was at the kitchen table working on what looked like flowcharts and algorithms. "Eli," Wheeler said, approaching carefully, "I'd like to understand what you're working on." For the next hour, Eli explained his latest project. He'd been developing predictive models for disaster response using patterns to anticipate where help would be needed most urgently. Agnes watched Wheeler's face cycle through disbelief, understanding, and finally, excitement. "Do you realize what this could do?" Wheeler asked Agnes quietly. "This could save thousands of lives, maybe more." He made an offer that night, seed funding to develop Eli's concepts into practical applications. A chance to turn the boy's patterns into real-world solutions. But more than that, he offered to hire Agnes as project director, ensuring she'd remain central to Eli's development. Agnes stared at the contract, her hands trembling slightly. The salary alone would solve every financial worry she'd ever had, but more importantly, it would let her continue guiding Eli while giving him resources to realize his potential. Vision free. The following months, what had started as a simple act of compassion evolved into something neither Agnes nor Eli could have imagined. The foundation Wheeler established grew rapidly, attracting attention from government agencies and international relief organizations. Eli's work on disaster prediction algorithms proved revolutionary. His systems could anticipate resource needs with unprecedented accuracy, potentially saving millions of dollars and countless lives. But the boy remained remarkably grounded, still insisting on handwritten notes, still clinging to Agnes when overwhelmed by adult attention. Agnes found herself traveling to conferences, speaking about Eli's work, and the importance of recognizing potential in unlikely places. The poor teacher who lived above a closed bakery was now a respected voice in educational innovation. One evening after returning from a presentation in Washington, D.C., Agnes found Eli on the balcony of their new apartment, a spacious place Wheeler had provided, though not far from their old neighborhood. "Miss Agnes," he said, not looking up from his notebook, "do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that morning?" Agnes sat beside him, looking out at the city lights. "What makes you ask?" "I was disappearing," he said, quietly. "Not just physically, inside too. I was starting to believe what everyone thought, that I was just a throwaway kid. Then you saw me." She pulled him close, feeling the familiar ache of protective love. "You saved me too, Eli. You reminded me why I became a teacher in the first place." The awards started coming regularly after that. Time magazine featured Eli as one of the most influential people of the year. Agnes was named Educator of the Decade by the National Teachers Association, but the moment that mattered most came during a quiet Sunday afternoon when they visited Eli's grandmother in the hospital. The older woman, recovering slowly from her illness, held Agnes's hand with tears in her eyes. "How you didn't just save him," she whispered. "You helped him save himself." 2 years later, Eli's foundation had revolutionized emergency response globally. His algorithms had been deployed during 3 major natural disasters, coordinating aid with efficiency previously thought impossible. The boy who'd been forgotten by society was now changing how the world helped its most vulnerable populations. But success hadn't changed the essence of who they were. Agnes still taught at a school the foundation had completely transformed, and Eli still spent afternoons working on his patterns. They'd just moved from a ratty apartment to a proper house, yet their Saturday mornings were spent at Lincoln Elementary helping other at-risk children. During a foundation gala celebrating 2 years of life-saving work, Agnes watched Eli address an audience of government officials, tech leaders, and humanitarian workers. At 11, he spoke with confidence while maintaining the humility that made him special. "When I was living on the streets," he said into the microphone, I thought I was invisible. But Miss Agnes saw me. She didn't see a problem to be solved or a burden to be managed. She saw someone worth caring about. He paused, finding Agnes in the audience. Everything we've accomplished started with one choice, the choice to care. That's the real innovation. That's what changes the world. The applause was thunderous, but Agnes only had eyes for Eli. The boy who'd given her a paper bluebird because he thought she needed hope had become hope for countless others. Later that evening, as they stood on their porch looking at the stars, Eli pulled out a new origami creation, more sophisticated than his childhood attempts, but unmistakably his work. "Another bluebird?" Agnes asked. He shook his head, smiling. "A phoenix, rising from ashes. I thought you might like it." Agnes accepted the paper bird, remembering that cold November morning when a homeless boy had seen something hopeful in her. Now she saw the same limitless potential she'd always known was there, finally recognized by a world that had almost let him slip away. "You know what the most beautiful part is?" she said, watching the stars twinkle above Chicago. "What's that? This is just the beginning for both of us. Congratulations, type 7 in the comments so I know you stayed with me until the end. Leave a like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. See you."